Let's talk about community concepts. Here's what you learn in this module. By the end of this module, you'll understand the member life cycle, engagement loops and why they matter, the difference between lurkers, contributors, and leaders, and the 1 to 9 to 90% rule of community participation. Understanding these concepts will allow you to design engagement strategies that actually work. You'll know who to focus on, when to focus on those things, and how to move them towards an active participation. Here's what the member cycle looks like. It is just a journey that a person takes from hearing about your community to becoming an active member or advocate. Here are some of the stages included. The first one is the visitor and the prospect stage. This is when someone learns about your community for the first time or is still trying to understand what you're doing. The second stage is the new member. This is the point where they join your community and decide to explore to see what you're all about. The third stage is the active membership. This is when they start participating regularly, start engaging in discussions, and giving feedback. There's a fourth stage, which is the contributor and advocate stage. This is a stage where community members help each other, provide feedback, and drive engagement. And finally, there's a leader and champion stage. This is a stage where everything they do shapes the culture, moderation, and even bring out mentors. Each stage requires different engagement strategies, and you have to pay attention accordingly. For example, a new member might need a welcome message or a guide on how to use the platform or how to go about conversing with other members. A contributor might be someone who needs recognition or badges based on the level of contribution that they are making in the community. The next thing we're talking about is engagement loops. An engagement loop is a system that encourages members to keep coming back. Here are some examples of an engagement loop. A member posts a question, other members answer, the original poster thanks the people that answered or responds, and then community discussion grows from there. Members return to check the updates, and it just keeps going on and on and on in circle. The key concept here is that engagement loops turn passive members into active participants, and your job as a community manager is to design these loops deliberately. So start tracking today which of these loops work best and replicate them in your community. When trying to understand your member roles, you need to make peace with the fact that not every member will post or actively engage in your community. Here are some member types that you need to look out for. The first one are the lurkers. It's usually 90 to 99% of your membership. And these are people that just come to observe, read, and consume content. That's literally the first stage of every community. That's the first stage where members go into in every community. Now, from that stage, they move to the next stage, which is the occasional contributors. And about 9% of your community membership are the people that usually engage in this stage. They comment, they share ideas, and sometimes they post. And then the next stage, where you have the 1% of the 1%, is usually the leaders or the super contributors. These are people that don't just comment, share ideas, or start a conversation. They are people that take it a step higher by creating content or guiding others or influencing the culture in that community. This matters because lockers are very valuable to the community. They consume the content and support metrics like the page views, how many people liked this, how many people reshared this, and then contributors and leaders are the drivers of the community culture and engagement. So when you are able to differentiate between these three types of membership in your community, it's easy to know what to target to each of the groups. Focus on nurturing your contributors and leaders while keeping lurkers engaged. Over time, the lurkers will start becoming contributors, and from becoming contributors, they're going to becoming super contributors or leaders. Here's a 1 to 9 to 90 rule. and it's a common pattern observed in online communities. It means that 1% of members create most of the content. So these are like your super contributors or your leaders. 9% of your members occasionally contribute. These are your contributors. And then 90% of members lurk around and consume content. Implications of this for community managers is that you don't have to expect all members to post regularly. Don't design strategies um, just because you want to keep everyone engaged. You have to strategically design these strategies or intentionally design these strategies to move the lockers up the ladder. Yes, it's okay to be a lurker in a community, but how do you move them from that stage to the next stage, which is the contributor stage? That's where you have to start thinking about what strategies to design. And finally, recognize and award your top 1% to encourage continued contribution. If they keep contributing in the community, nothing happens, nobody's saying thank you, nobody's saying well done, eventually they're going to give up. They're going to get tired because they won't feel seen and they go back to the lurker stage. So you have to create activities, programs, initiatives, or things to keep encouraging them to keep contributing. This can simply mean upgrading their tags or their badges or putting out spotlight posts. Little things like that matter. When we talk about motivation in community management, one thing you need to know is that community members participate for a variety of reasons, and these reasons are what motivates them and drives them to be an active part of your community. The first one is social. They like to meet like minded people, they just want to connect with people. The second motivation is education. They want to learn new things, they want to see how other people are navigating certain things, in their own sphere of work. And then there's a professional part. They just want to network with other professionals. They want to build skills, and connect with other professionals. There's a fourth one, which is influence and recognition. They want to become known. They want to help other people. When you talk about certain things, they want to be the first one to come to mind. And then there's a fifth one, which is fun and entertainment. They want to enjoy themselves. They want to see how others are, doing stuff. They want to just share their stuff, flex their muscle. So you need to understand these different motivations. And some of the tips that I'll give you is, first off, always align your content and engagement activities with these motivations. The signs are always there. Before you ask, how do I figure out what the motivations of my community is? The signs are always there by way of interaction, by the way community members are putting out content or how they are conversing with each other. Or it can be as simple as you putting out a quick survey form to try to understand what drives their motivation. So, based off on what you'll find out, ensure that you align your content and engagement activities to match up with these motivations. Ask yourself, why would this member log into Slack or Discord today? What is going to bring them back to the community? And finally, you can also ask members what they want. Half the time, they're going to tell you, oh, I like this or I don't want this. Sometimes, most of their requests can be so exhausting. You may not be able to meet up to all of them, but at least you should be able to pick out some that would be mutually beneficial both to the organization and the community. And then when designing engagement, these are things to have in mind. First off, your discussion prompt, ask open-ended questions. It encourages conversations. When you ask open-ended questions, people are somewhat forced to start sharing their ideas, start sharing knowledge of what they think about a particular thing. Two, introduce gamification in your communities. Things like badges, things like points, things like challenges. First to finish this, you give the person a shout out or you give the person a badge. People want to do something that they are being recognized for, and that's where gamification comes in. The third one is events and highlights. Host events, meetups, contests, webinars, things that help them learn as they progress in their journey and as they advance. Fourthly, highlight contributions. Showcase members who constantly add value. It encourages them and also encourages other people to step up their game and keep giving value. And finally, feedback loops. When questions are asked, respond quickly to questions and give suggestions. It helps keeps the community alive. And your goal is to make your members feel heard, valued, and excited to participate. So guard that with your heart. When we talk about member segmentation strategies, here's how you can realistically manage different types of community members. For instance, the lockers, which is in the first stage, you get to provide resources for them, send out newsletters, and low effort ways to engage. You can just do like quick check-ins on them to figure out how they are doing. Secondly, occasional contributors. When you're trying to, come up with strategies for this set of people, think of, ways you can encourage participation via prompts, events, or polls, just to figure out what they're looking for and how best to support them. And finally, when you want to, when you're thinking of leaders and advocates, think of strategies like giving them recognition, exclusive roles, or leadership opportunities. Let them take up responsibilities within the community and lead other people. Always track every member activity and engagement to identify potential leaders. And here's how to measure community activity. One thing you should know is that different members contribute differently, so measure strategically. Consumption metrics include the reads, the views, the downloads. These can be for lockers. Participation metrics can include comments, posts, shares, and this is for contributors. And finally, influence metrics can be people's content, their content reach, or their mentoring impact. This is particularly for leaders. So the key concept here is that not all engagement is visible. The lockers add value quietly while you constantly work to move them up the ladder. Here are some common community pitfalls. One, expecting 100% participation. It's never going to happen. No. No matter how small or big your community is, 100% participation is never ever going to happen, right? And even in communities where, say, you're running a program, a temporary program, and people register, they want to be a part of the program, 100% participation just never happens. Another community pitfall is ignoring lockers. They are as important as the contributors and they are also as important as the leaders. These are people you're trying to motivate, these are people you're trying to encourage to move up the ladder. So do not ignore the lockers. Thirdly, overloading members with content. No, why do I have to wake up and log into Slack and I'm seeing a bunch of things everywhere? Like, how do I catch up? What do I do? I need to breathe. So, design your prompts, your engagement prompts in a way that it doesn't overwhelm your community members or it doesn't come up as information overload. The fourth pitfall is failing to recognize contributors. One thing you should understand is that humans like that sense of belonging. They like recognition. If you don't recognize your contributors, the people that are actually helping you put this community together, hold this community together by providing content, tutorials, guiding other people, then eventually they're going to feel like their work is not seen and they're going to leave you to it by yourself, right? So, one way to encourage them and also encourage the people, other people in the community, is to constantly recognize them. And when we talk about recognition, you don't necessarily need to give anybody a certification or you don't need to give them money or anything. It can be a spotlight. It can be featuring their story on your newsletter. It can be a shout out. It can be a badge that you can put on LinkedIn. These are samples of things you can do to recognize active contributors in your community. Now, if you have the money or you have a budget or your community has a budget, you can go a step further, giving them merge, and some other things. And finally, letting engagement loops break is one community pitfall that you should avoid. Do not be in a situation where you don't allow for feedback, follow up, or response. When someone asks you a question, they should be able to get feedback and ask follow up questions. That loop needs to be active to keep conversations going. So, one tip I have for you is build systems and habits to maintain engagement. And my key takeaway for you in this module is that the first one is our communities have predictable member behaviors as long as you're using the right strategies. Member lifecycle helps you plan engagement. Engagement loops keep members coming back. Workers, contributors, and leaders have different needs, and the 1 to 9 to 90 rule explains why only a small percent create content. So you have to put all of these things into consideration. Understanding these concepts will allow you to design smarter and more sustainable community strategies.